Can we talk about migration? Because Shabana Mahmood's going to unveil this plan for a good citizen test.
Yeah, I know. I'm really looking forward to this at Labour conference after this headline. I don't know where the...
Yes.
This headline, where Starmer says you're a racist if you're concerned about migration. So that's going to be a really, really interesting cabinet.
Well, this policy, they would say, then isn't racist.
Well, apparently not, but apparently it is supposed to go to address the concerns about migration that people may have.
Here's a man who was wanting to counter and attack reform on this, and he's blown his chance. He's done it the wrong way.
Exactly.
Because basically saying to the people who've got genuine concerns about numbers here and whatever, you are a racist again. Once again, he's fallen down that hole.
Well, and the communications then don't match between his speech to the Labour conference, and Shabana Mahmood's speech to the Labour conference coming today, where she is talking about putting controls on migration.
And deportation.
I'm a fan of hers. I think she's the most conservative Home Secretary we've had in a long time. A lot of the proposals being put forward today, I cannot for the life of me understand why a Conservative in the Home Office for 15 years was not putting these forward. You know, ILR, indefinite leave to remain, being extended to the qualification for 10 years. You have to be a net contributor. Your English has to be to a much higher standard than just an automatic box tick that pushes you over the line. All of these things were things that, in theory, we could have done.
And to a lot of people, that would just sound like common sense.
Absolutely, and I cannot understand why it is that it's the Labour Party scared about reform putting these in place when the Conservative Party was in government for as long as it was and didn't do anything like this. I also think the route between indefinite leave to remain and citizenship needs to be looked at. I don't know that this goes far enough at looking at that. Obviously, as someone who comes from a Welsh political background, I would argue that if you speak good enough Welsh rather than good enough English, that should be a qualification, although the Welsh Secretary has yet to respond to my letter on that earlier this year. I think that a lot of these sentiments are really, really good, but I fail to understand how you make the good citizenship judgment. And they're saying that if you've made an extraordinary contribution, then you can get it faster. Those are the things I think are going to be held up in the courts, because how is the government making the judgment call on this? Is the Home Secretary sitting in front of 100,000 applications a year going, yes, I think you're a good egg and I think that you're not?
And who's checking on who's volunteering?
Exactly. And what kind of volunteering are we talking about? And is there a national standard for that? You know, it's very hard to be able to create a minimum standard, a minimum threshold for what you might meet there in the are you a good egg category. I don't disagree that you should be a good egg if you're coming here, but how do you judge it?
You'll not convince me that there will be a department within the civil service who will be ready to tick the boxes and say, she's a very good volunteer, that's going to be okay. They won't care less.
No, and I think that the box ticking that they have now is easy and the box ticking that's being proposed is hard.
Yeah.
And I think that the leap from one to the other is going to be very difficult to achieve within the Home Office.
Do you think the party will even get it through? I mean, look at welfare cuts.
Well, this doesn't appear to have sort of a financial penalty attached to it. And the welfare cuts issue was one where people were saying, well, our voters aren't going to stomach this, and, you know, why aren't we putting the hammer down in other areas? That's where the argument about a wealth tax, wrong as it is, were coming forward instead. You know, why isn't the hammer coming down on taxation rather than state cuts? This is mostly about the administration of a system rather than the cost of a system. Hopefully it should bring the cost of a system down if it works well. But as for what's being announced, I think we have to consider that this is for a party conference speech rather than, you know, a policy paper that's going to the House itself. So there's a lot of meat that still has to be put on the bones to this. But I wonder how well this is going to go over with some Labour voters who are more pro-migration from the Labour membership point of view, and this is a speech to membership, versus how this is going to go in places like the Welsh Valleys, where they are having their lunch eaten by both Reform and Plaid Cymru. And a lot of this in the next 6 months will be about whether or not Labour can hold on to Wales in that Senedd election next year, when they have had a victory in each election since universal suffrage. And it doesn't look like they're going to have that position hold into May next year.
Lauren, I'm looking at this super dinghy.
The what?
It's the largest ever boat that has been launched to carry migrants or so. 1,300 of them arrived this weekend. 125 can easily fit on this super dinghy here. Now, Zia Yusuf, who's the former party chairman of Reform, he says the only place Labour is driving innovation is in the illegal dinghy market. Do not complain or Starmer will call you a racist.
That's a good line. I think that a super dinghy is the natural progression from your only attempt at stopping the boats being, can we slash them on the way out of France? Can we, if your only option for stopping them is can we try and stop these boats from functioning at all, they'll build bigger and better boats. There has to be a better way of stopping them. There has to be a better way of stopping people getting into boats to begin with. The Prime Minister isn't exactly wrong in the need to break down the organised crime network supporting this, because it is a crime network that is getting people across the channel, and we see that when it comes to the people who then take illegal work here in order to pay off the people smugglers.
Not only are they not breaking down those networks doing that, they seem to be growing. These networks seem to be cocking two fingers up and saying, you think you can stop us? Look at this, baby.
And it's like whack-a-mole, isn't it?
Yeah,
you take out one criminal gang, another one would appear.
As I've said on this programme before, the French are turning around to us and saying, you have too many incentives to be here. We haven't clamped down on the sort of, not the benefits, because that's a very loaded word, but the incentives for people to want to come here. And that's making the French struggle with being able to stop people getting into boats to begin with because of the numbers involved. And when the French are telling you that you aren't doing enough, I think the answer has to be you need to do more. And I think that there is a very big conversation that has to be had across Europe that I think a lot of people in Europe at government level are willing to have now about what is the definition of a refugee, what is the definition of an asylum seeker, a possible new classification for economic migrant. A lot of the definitions we're talking about come from an era where the cost of transportation from parts of the world was so much higher. And now that it's lower and there's more countries reaching middle income status, we have to reassess what those definitions are.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private Internet Access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cyber criminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C-18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private Internet Access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GBNews discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com/GBnews to start protecting yourself digitally today.
We've got the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, who joins us from the QE2 Centre in London. Chris, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning. A pleasure, as always, to be here on GB News.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you for saying. I hope you're still saying that in 5 minutes' time.
We'll see.
We'll see. So it's all happening up in Liverpool, the Labour Party conference there. The Prime Minister has called the reform migrant policy. This is over all the papers today. He's called it racist. What would you call it, my friend?
Well, I certainly wouldn't call it racist. There is nothing racist at all about wanting to control our borders, and it says a lot about Keir Starmer that he dismisses border control plans in that way. He was completely wrong to use that word. And of course, Labour's own approach to border control is extremely weak. Just on Saturday, a couple of days ago, they let in another 895 illegal immigrants across the English Channel, nearly 1,000 in just a single day. And what Labour are announcing today is something which we Conservatives proposed in Parliament a few months ago, and Labour voted against it. And here they are now saying that there needs to be some conditions before people get indefinite leave to remain, the right to stay permanently. But that goes nowhere near far enough, in my view, because not only should we do that and say people ought to be earning decent amounts of money and making a contribution and not claiming benefits before they get the permanent right to stay. Not only that, which Labour voted against a few months ago, we should be increasing the salary thresholds, for example, before people can bring family members into the country. And we should also be getting rid of the Human Rights Act for immigration matters, so we can deport everybody, not some people, but everybody who arrives here illegally by small boat, by dinghy over the channel, and we should deport every single foreign criminal as well. But those measures that we Conservatives have developed in detail, Labour has been voting against throughout this year, which tells you what they really think about border control. They're not serious about border control, the Labour Party, and what Starmer said at the weekend was firstly a disgraceful smear, but it also shows you that this Labour Party is not serious about border control.
Well, you mentioned dinghies there. I don't know if you've seen what's being dubbed as a mega dinghy that crossed over the channel at the weekend. A record 125 people on a single boat. As we know, it's a very dangerous crossing. You've spent time in Calais. How do we tackle this?
That's right. So the biggest ever single boat, 125 illegal immigrants on one vessel. When this started out a few years ago, there were only about 12 or 16 per dinghy. Now it's 125. And because Keir Starmer has lost control, the first 8 months of this year have been the worst in history for illegal immigrants crossing the channel, probably the worst in history ever, in fact. Well, how do we grip it? So what we can't do is rely on the French, I'm afraid. And the Labour Party policy seems to be thinking that so far they've sent 7 people back over the last 2 or 3 weeks, when about, I think, 2,000 or more than 2,000 have arrived. So clearly, 2,000 arrive, you send 7 back. Obviously, that's going to be no deterrent. The French are not intercepting boats near the shore, which Keir Starmer promised they would do back in July. That's not happening. The whole smash the gangs thing is total nonsense. You notice that Labour don't mention that anymore. So none of that's working. So what would work? What would work is if everybody crossing the channel in a dinghy knew that they were certain, or at least very near certain, going to get removed straight away with no judicial process, no court hearing, just removed within hours or at the most a few days, then pretty soon they would stop crossing. Now, you could remove them either back to their country of origin, if that's possible, or to a safe third country like Rwanda, if not. And if we did that, the crossings would stop. Australia did that a few years ago and it worked, and Donald Trump has done it in America this year, and crossings over the Mexican-American border since January have fallen by 90% because it works.
You were talking there about smashing the gangs, and we look at reform, and the polls over the weekend which showed them to be a government in waiting. Would they smash the Conservatives? Because you said the Labour Party wasn't serious about border control. Are you serious about reform, or how do you see reform?
Well, look, I think the difference between the Conservatives and reform is that, look, Nigel Farage has some good slogans and he's a charismatic leader. I will give him that. But what reform don't have is a serious and credible and detailed plan to fix these problems. And we Conservatives have already put forward some quite detailed and credible plans in Parliament and forced those to a vote. For example, getting rid of the Human Rights Act for immigration matters, having a binding annual cap on immigration, creating conditions before you can stay here permanently. And we're going to be announcing more detailed policies in the very near future. So the difference between us and reform is that we're doing the serious work needed to develop credible policies that are actually going to work in practice. Reform have great slogans, I completely accept that, but they don't have detailed and credible plans, and that's the difference between the two parties, between us and Reform.
I'm clear this conference season at the Lib Dem conference and now at the Labour conference is that the Tories aren't being spoken about. I mean, you're nowhere to be seen. It's Reform that are setting the agenda. It's Reform that they are responding to and reacting to. I mean, nobody is talking about you. It seems as though you're now a fringe party rather than the main opposition.
Well, I don't think that's true at all. It was Kemi Badenoch at PMQs asking questions about Angela Rayner, which helped force her resignation, and it was the Conservatives who did all the research on her tax affairs. It was Kemi Badenoch asking about Peter Mandelson, getting him rightly fired a couple of weeks ago. That was the Conservatives doing that.
I'm talking about the conferences where you're not being mentioned.
Well, look, I mean, our conference hasn't happened yet, to be fair. I mean, our conference is next week, so I expect when our conference happens, it will get reported very widely. The Reform conference didn't really get reported at all, actually, although, to be fair, that was partly because Angela Rayner resigned at the same time, but their conference barely got reported at all. And by the way, and Labour's announcement today on indefinite leave to remain is a copy and paste of what we put down in Parliament a few months ago, except it doesn't go far enough, as I've said already.
Chris,
so we are setting the agenda for
we
opposition.
Can't go any further. We're out of time, my friend. Thank you very much indeed for your time today. Shadow Home Secretary, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.